In the years before the internet as well as my love for gaming took off, cartoons were my entertainment medium of choice. But given how critical and angry I came off as towards them during my earliest YouTube days, I wouldn't blame you if you find that hard to believe. But it's true, I really did love cartoons. I still kind of do today, but not nearly as much. Not necessarily because, oh, they're all horrible and there's nothing good on TV ever anymore. I mean, that's not entirely true. Most of my waning interest in them just came from me finding other ways to spend my leisure time as I got older. But I am still able to look back and appreciate the time I had with them. Maybe my appreciation for cartoons when I was younger wasn't as deep as it is now, but that's just something that changes with time. So today, we're going to reflect on the 10 shows I consider to be my absolute favorites. And don't worry, this isn't a 90s nostalgia trip. Come to think of it, a lot of the 90s cartoons I was going to put on this list, I ultimately decided not to because the main reason I loved those shows was for nostalgia. Nothing more than that. Some of my choices might actually surprise you, but they're on here for better reasons than pure nostalgia. Also, as a small rule to keep this a top 10, no anime. Kim Possible. I didn't watch Disney Channel nearly as much as I did Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, but it did have some programming I really enjoyed, and Kim Possible is the first one that comes to mind. I just really love this show. Kim Possible isn't a superhero, she doesn't have any powers or supernatural abilities, and yet she still saves the world on a weekly basis and treats it like it's no big deal. Kim can do just about anything from skydiving to rock climbing to martial arts, and even though she accomplishes extraordinary human feats daily, Kim is never invincible or overpowered. She doesn't always accomplish her missions on the first try, and she still makes plenty of mistakes, just like anybody else. And that's how this show is able to have a plot with conflicts in the first place. I love Kim because I view her as a character worth rooting for, and I find her simply enjoyable to watch in action, and yet she is still relatable and humanly flawed. The subplots about the drama in her teenage life aren't always the best, but they're rarely ever annoying or totally unbearable. But while Kim is a pretty likable character in her own right, it's with the rest of the cast that I feel the show really shines. Everyone from her best friend and comedic foil Ron Stoppable to Kim's bumbling arch-nemesis Dr. Draken. They help carry the humor and fun of each episode. Heck, their personalities may be even more entertaining to watch than Kim herself at times. There's a nice healthy blend of action and comedy that you can come to anticipate and enjoy every single time. The show is never too over the top or unbelievable, it's never too serious or too silly, never too flashy or too slow. Despite obviously being geared towards a female demographic, I never really found anything that girly or childish about it. You know how nobody ever really felt embarrassed about watching Powerpuff Girls growing up, even if they were a boy, simply because they just kicked so much ass? Well, Kim Possible is just a continuation of that in my opinion. It just goes to show, sometimes you don't have to have superpowers to make the impossible possible. Codename Kids Next Door. This was a show I never truly appreciated for what it was until it was over. Codename Kids Next Door was probably one of the best concepts ever conceived for a kids show. I mean, what kid didn't want any of this stuff to be real when they watched it? It was freaking awesome. Young kids developing their own military, weapons, vehicles, and technology just to act independently from adults and combat them when they treat kids unfairly. There was really nothing else quite like it at the time. The missions they go on and the stakes they face are so over the top and downright ridiculous that it all just feels like it came from a kid's imagination now coming to life. But for all of the insanely cool and creative action sequences, the humor was derived entirely from tongue-in-cheek adolescent problems and rather minuscule issues in the grand scheme of things, such as eating vegetables, going to school, brushing your teeth, doing chores, things kids are always challenging adults about. The naivety of the characters is blown so far out of proportion that it really makes the show something hilariously awesome. These aren't child geniuses with any degree of formal training. They act like battle-hardened commandos in a way that just feels like they're pretending, and we as the viewers are watching their imaginations come to life in real time. The freedom of the universe they live in was practically every kid's dream come true. But I really admire how the show expanded and matured a bit as time went on. That's not to say that the kids ever aged, until the very end anyway, but aging was treated as such a life or death situation. Watch any of the earlier episodes, and then compare them to any in the later seasons, and you'll see that there's a drastic change in tone and direction of the story. It used to be about some meddlesome brats that wanted to clear out the adult swimming pool to let kids swim outside of the kiddie pool, and that matured into combating adult organizations on a global scale. More of the kids next door was shown off with the introduction of the moon base and different sectors of kids around the world. It all just felt like Star Wars at times. There was even an entire episode that was clearly one huge Star Wars reference itself. At its core, Codename Kids Next Door was a show that made me proud to be a kid. Teen Titans. Oh my god, another action show? I'm sorry, I just really like shows with people beating each other to a pulp in the most stylish or flashy ways possible. But while Kim Possible and Kids Next Door had their own unique draws to the action, Teen Titans kind of does away with that. It's good, wholesome superheroism at its finest. I was never really that big on superheroes growing up, until I watched Teen Titans. That's when I got a taste of what I had been missing out on. While most cartoons attempted to strike a balance between comedy and serious storylines, most of the time Teen Titans went all out in just one extreme or the other. There were episodes that were so dark and disturbing that it felt like this wasn't a kids show anymore. And then there were some that were so goddamn silly I couldn't believe I was still watching the same show. Teen Titans came to me at an age when I was starting to grow up a little bit and looking for just a bit more substance in my cartoons. I was ready for action that was slightly grittier, characters and themes that were a tad more complex. But I also came to realize that I didn't always need my cartoons to have a certain gimmick to them. Sometimes keeping it simple just works best. For Teen Titans, a team of superheroes doing what they do best was really all I needed. It's a shame that this show never got a proper final season with the lingering plot points it left us with, and it's an even bigger shame when you think about what it has become today. But the original Teen Titans will always be one of my favorite action shows of all time. Kim Possible, Codename Kids Next Door, and other shows of the genre I enjoy all have some sort of hook or bells and whistles to them, but Teen Titans does not. It keeps things simple and a little more real. The theme song does not lie. When there's trouble, you know who to call. And it's not the Justice League. The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Jimmy Neutron is one of the few television shows out there that I feel did CG animation right, and in my opinion, it still holds up pretty well today. The models are a lot cleaner and smoother than most cartoons who tried this art style at the time, and perhaps more importantly, the animations and movements are pretty natural and acceptable to watch. Most of the time. I liked Jimmy as a lead character because he was actually smart. The typical cartoon lead is usually bland and normal or just a complete idiot. Very rarely is the character a boy genius, and that's kind of refreshing to me, because then you can expect the humor of the writing to come from somewhere other than the main character's bumbling stupidity or antics. But as smart as Jimmy was, he had more than his fair share of humorous shortcomings, which came in the form of either his inventions backfiring or any of the other characters on the show being so normal and not as smart as Jimmy that it kind of made Jimmy seem out of touch with the world around him and almost alien at times. He was so goddamn smart that when it came to being normal, Jimmy was so bad at it that it was funny. And his idiot friends Carl and Sheen actually contributed quite a lot to some of the show's best moments overall. But just because a certain character is really funny doesn't mean he or she needs a spin-off series, especially when the concept of it is utter trash. Oh, yeah, this just doesn't really work without Jimmy. I mean, Sheen's best material came from building off of Carl and Jimmy, so without them, he just doesn't stand up on his own, and the entire thing is just ugh. But getting back to something that's not completely terrible, the plot of each episode goes like this. Jimmy has a problem, he invents something to fix that problem, but the invention backfires and creates a new problem, so he has to use his smarts or any seemingly useless knowledge he has acquired in that episode to correct that second problem. If it sounds similar to the plot of something like Fairly Odd Parents, that's because it kind of was. Just replace magic with science and 2D animation with CG, and there you go. Maybe that's why the two shows crossed over not once, not twice, but 3 times. I don't see people talk about Adventures of Jimmy Neutron that much, surprisingly. The show ran from 2002 to 2006, so maybe it isn't quite old enough yet to be considered nostalgic, but it went on for 3 seasons and had several TV specials, so it clearly had some kind of following. Steven Universe. Steven Universe really surprised me. After the whole CN Real debacle and Nickelodeon's descent into an abundance of cringeworthy sitcoms made me swear off television almost entirely, Steven Universe was the first cartoon I'd watched in years and legitimately enjoyed. I went into it thinking, oh god, this kid's gonna be so annoying and he's going to ruin everything while these other characters are trying to get shit done. And admittedly, it took a little commitment before I finally broke out of that mentality. But I am so beyond glad that I did. I still can't believe how vast and complex the lore and history in this cartoon is. So much stuff happened before Steven's time, and it's continuing to build more and more of a bigger picture with every new episode. But there's no way you could pick up on any of this from the promos that Cartoon Network airs, where it seems like they're insisting that this is just another one of their "lol, XD's so random and weird, laugh at my antics" cartoons that they just love to push as of late. I don't really want to go into too much more detail about Steven Universe here, because I'd rather be a sellout and plug my analysis I did on the show last year for new viewers who may not have seen that video yet. I suggest you go check that out if you want to hear me go into a little more detail about why I love Steven Universe so much, because we've still got 5 more entries to go. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. The more I think about this show, the more I love it for what it isn't rather than what it is. I know that makes absolutely no sense, but neither does this show. It's not cutesy, it's not charming, and it's never heartwarming or thought-provoking. It's just so stupidly real that I can't help but laugh at everything it does. I don't think I could ever do an analysis on this show, because you know how I always come off as preachy and inspirational? Well, this show has absolutely nothing like that. It doesn't even begin to try. Mandy is a human incarnation of pure evil who controls the world and everything in it, and Billy is on an entirely new level of stupid that I don't even feel annoyed by him. He's so much of an idiot, yet he never insults my intelligence like most annoying cartoon idiot characters do. Whenever I watch him, I feel compelled to sit back and just roll with it. And Grimm is supposed to be this powerful, menacing entity, and yet he hates being friends with Billy and Mandy so much that he's given up on everything and is now just kind of rolling with it too. Nothing about this show makes any sense. There's no consistency, no logic, and no sense that anyone in this world really cares about anything. It sounds really depressing and boring, but trust me, it isn't. It's hilarious to watch and I love every second of it. The show is dark, but not quite to the point where it's edgy. The best way I can describe it, as silly as it sounds, would be something like this. Anybody else remember Invader Zim? That show was so dark, edgy, gross, and everything was so doom and gloom all the time. Well, Billy and Mandy is like a slightly more adult Invader Zim. It still has the doom and gloom, but it's more mature about it. Not like it has adult content mature, but just that it has kind of grown out of that annoying edgy phase and is more respectable in what it does. The appeal of Billy and Mandy is all in the writing. It's so perfect, so absolutely perfect. The humor is random, but with a little bit of actual thought and timing put into it. There are supernatural elements, but Mandy is hilariously more dangerous and powerful than anything we'll ever see. The show just doesn't care, and doesn't just break the fourth wall. It locks up every tiny piece of what was left of it in individual chambers and tortures each of them for many, many 11-minute increments. Billy and Mandy is just one of those shows that I want to sit down and watch when I'm feeling lazy or bitter towards the stupidity of the world around me, and I want to just not care about anything for a while. And I grow to love it more and more as I get older. Bless you, Maxwell Adams. Bless you. SpongeBob SquarePants. Let's get one thing straight here. This entry is for the first few seasons of SpongeBob. Pretty much everything before the first movie came out. Everything after that, well, let's just kind of forget that stuff exists for a while. The only reason I'm doing this is because, yeah, the show has gotten bad. I mean, really bad. But when it used to be good, it used to be so very, very good. The writing had so much passion, so much pride, and so much fun to it. It was a time when the writers actually treated every character on the show with respect instead of degrading them to singular roles or stereotypes. SpongeBob could be smart, but still be silly. Patrick's humor was classic instead of just stupid for stupidity's sake. Squidward was still a jerk, but at least he did bad deeds that justified any of the torture or misfortune that would strike him. Sandy was so much more than just the scientist. Mr. Krabs was, well, I guess he was always obsessed with money, but he was obsessed in a way that was funny instead of just being really sad and pathetic. I could go on and on with these characters. There's a reason that so many people are able to quote this show as much as they do in this day and age. SpongeBob used to be timeless. It used to be memorable. It used to be something for everyone. It had stuff in its writing that was meant for adults, and I can enjoy and appreciate that stuff now that I am an adult. Go back and watch any of the earlier seasons. It really is easy to see how much effort and care went into crafting each episode. SpongeBob was popular, but it was never rushed or pressured and milked because of its popularity. It was able to take its time to entertain us because Nickelodeon had more of an appealing lineup to keep us occupied when SpongeBob wasn't on back in those days. I know I said I wanted to list shows that I didn't love just because of nostalgia, but I just have to make an exception for SpongeBob because if we're talking about my favorite shows of all time, it would be an absolute crime to not include SpongeBob, even if that's entirely based on what he used to be. As a kid, SpongeBob was an icon of my childhood, as he was for a lot of people. He had more than earned his popularity. I don't know if the show has done anything to climb out of the rut it has fallen into over the years after the first movie, and I frankly don't care anymore. But the reason SpongeBob is on my list is because even though it might not be as good nowadays, to put it quite frankly, when this show was good, it wasn't just good. It was great, and easily something that anyone of any and every age could enjoy. Hey Arnold. Okay, this show is just a classic. Comedy wasn't the focal point like with SpongeBob, but there was just nothing to hate about Hey Arnold. The concept was simple, the characters were very normal and down to earth, and everything about the setting and the episode conflicts just made the show feel so real. I often forget that this is a cartoon at times because of how realistic it gets. You know, aside from the titular character having a head shaped like a football. Remember what I said about Teen Titans not having any gimmicks? Well, I feel Hey Arnold is the slice of life equivalent to that. There's nothing too crazy or flashy or over the top about this one. The plot is very simple and the characters are very genuine, even if some of them do rely on tired old kid stereotypes like the bully and the snobby rich girl. Arnold was honestly a pretty big inspiration for me when I was growing up. He was always honest, smart, mature, and well-rounded in his activities, and he always cared about helping his friends when they needed guidance. He was the kind of wholesome human being that I believe everyone should strive to be, even though when it comes to being a cartoon character, Arnold can be a little bit bland at times. In fact, when I watch the show now, I kind of wonder why Arnold is the main character. Not that he isn't a good one. Everyone can be so crazy at times that he's pretty normal by comparison, and that can sometimes just be a blessing if everyone else is just too much. But when other characters are being abnormal, they sometimes have told better stories as a result. Arnold's biggest conflict in life is that he never really knew his parents, and that's about it. But then you look at someone like Helga and her struggles and her terrible family life, and you wonder why this show isn't called Hey Helga. Think about it. She has an arrogant, loudmouthed father who cares more about running his business than being a family man, an older sister who overshadows Helga, yet smothers her with sisterly affection at the same time, and a mother who was quite heavily implied to just be hungover in every single scene she appears in. This is not even including her conflictions of being madly in love with Arnold, but desperately hiding it with aggression. Helga is one of the most tragic, yet memorable and entertaining cartoon characters I have ever witnessed, and even though Arnold is a breath of fresh air for viewers when he needs to be, if it weren't for Helga, this show might come off as a bit dull or boring for a cartoon. Hey Arnold is just one of those shows that I go back to when I don't want any action. I don't need to laugh a whole lot, but I just want to watch something wholesome for a while, and I couldn't be more thankful that this show exists. Ed, Edd, and Eddy. This show is just a drug. There's honestly no better way for me to put it. It looks like it was made by someone who was on drugs, the humor and some of Ed's funniest moments seem like they were written by someone who does drugs, and I was somehow hopelessly addicted to it for years like it was a drug. Billy and Mandy and early SpongeBob had humor that was honestly more sophisticated than this, but Ed, Edd and Eddy walks the fine line between being accepted for a silly and random cartoon and something that would be shunned for just being too annoying. I commend it for walking on the former side of that line. There's some strange balance to everything in this universe that just makes everything on the show work. You've got Eddy, who is obnoxiously arrogant, greedy, and rude, and yet he always gets what's coming to him in a way that's funny, but still fair. Then there's Ed, who lives up to his title as the lovable oaf so well that I think even Billy would find him stupid and annoying. But then Double D is there as the logical and well-mannered one to counter anything and everything his bumbling best friends say and do. And yet he hilariously has to get caught up in their punishments and problems as well. These three are the closest any friends could ever get. They put up with each other's obvious and intrusive flaws so well that they come to rely on them, and there's just something magical about that. Yet even when the plot seems really repetitious and predictable, it never fails to be an enjoyable ride for me from start to finish every single time. I can always expect that the Eds will try to scam the kids for money so they can buy Jawbreakers, but screw everything up in the process. It's always the same beginning and ending, but the way that same conclusion is reached is different and entertaining every single time. It's a brilliant formula that worked, and because it worked for so many seasons, Ed and Eddy has had a lasting impact on me. I don't even have to watch the episodes in any kind of sequence. Almost every single episode is enjoyable as a standalone viewing experience that I always know what I'm getting and can always count on it to make me laugh and wring my brain dry of any logic or reason. It's the perfect kid version of the Three Stooges, and I'll always love every second of it. And of course, what would a countdown be without some honorable mentions? Avatar: The Last Airbender / Legend of Korra. Okay, if you know me at all, this one shouldn't be much of a surprise. And I'm sorry if it's a little anticlimactic, but it's the truth. I really just love the Avatar series that much. It has everything I personally want in a cartoon. I love the story and the world building. I love the unique style that bending brings to martial arts in this universe. I love how silly and serious, flawed and insightful, loud and passionate, or thoughtful and reserved each and every one of the characters are. The overarching storyline is quite literally one hell of a ride from beginning to end, emotionally and spiritually. Hell, there's a reason I made a separate list counting down what I feel were 10 of the show's most emotional moments. I'm not trying to say this is the greatest cartoon of all time and that it's absolutely perfect in every single way and that it does no wrong. No, that's not the point at all. I'm not trying to convey that sentiment about any of the shows on this list. But when I, as an individual, watch Avatar, it just strikes all the right notes with me. It invigorates me with all of its bending sequences, and then pulls me back and slows everything down when it's time for more of a character's personality, history, or struggles to take center stage. I could watch this series from beginning to end over and over again. It doesn't matter if I already know what's going to happen or what twists or turns the show is going to take, because it's not about what the show does, it's how it is done. Avatar tells its story so beautifully well that I lose myself within it, even though I'm treading all too familiar ground. And everything I've said about The Last Airbender can be pretty much applied to Legend of Korra as well. Sure, a lot of people don't think it lived up to the original as a sequel. It had its blunders and weaker approaches, of course, but I personally feel like the spirit of the original series was still very much preserved in Korra. As a character and an avatar, Korra did things her own way, and I kind of appreciate that. This wasn't a retelling of Aang's journey. Korra made it her own, but a lot of the elements that made the original series work were still very much there in Legend of Korra, and while not everything worked out, most of it did. I think Zahir was a better villain than anyone in the original Avatar series, maybe even just a little bit better than Azula. Avatar is everything I love about and want to see in cartoons. I don't try to compare other shows I like and hold them up to the same standard as Avatar, as sometimes that's frankly impossible. And I will certainly agree that this show had its flaws and shortcomings as well. I will not deny any reasonable criticism towards it. But in a countdown filled to maximum capacity with bias, Avatar stands above all as my favorite cartoon of all time. So what are your 10 favorite cartoons? Feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. This has been Brawmastro12, signing off.